Just going to check on my other phone to make sure I'm actually live here. If I am or not. Got a lot of subscriptions. Ah, there I am. I am in fact live. Ah, all set. Beautiful. Plug this phone into charge. And hey, hello everyone. I decided to do this as a live broadcast. It's like a shop hangout. I'm going to work on making the bread knives. I have a first one that I gave a try at, and it's there was some fail involved, like there usually is. I know it probably doesn't look it on screen, but there was some fail involved. And I also need to change the design up a little bit, partly because of my tools, partly just to, I think, make things function better. Anyway, I may end up editing this, downloading it from YouTube, and editing it, making a proper video out of it. But I thought we could do a hangout while I work on making my second bread knife. You use them, you hold them like this, and the blade is obviously here. You cut that way with them. If you haven't seen them before, I came up with my own design because I didn't like a lot of the ones that I saw, because most of the ones have the handle up here off the piece of wood, which seemed wrong for me. So I put it here so it was in line with the actual blade, which seemed right. But it does tend to make it a little heavy on the wood side. And you can't see, but it tends to want to do that. It's not a lot of weight. So my next prototype, I actually have the handle like centered between the wood and the blade. And I think that's a better way to do it. And also some of them, I'll include a picture if I do this as a proper video, or I can probably pull it up on my phone. A lot of them had the handle kind of like curving like this. And that's just, they would be the right shape if you were holding it like this, but the wrong shape if you're holding it like this. So I came up with my own design because that's what I like to do anyway. Let me bring you over to the bench here. All right. So this is my new design. The first step is to make a template. And as I was looking at this, I think I actually want this to come down just a little bit further. So when I make the template, I'll actually bring these down like another square's breadth. Anyway, so first things first, we're going to use some spray adhesives to stick this onto this, and then we're going to cut that shape out of the template material, which is just MDF, regular old MDF. You know, the thing about these spray glues, if you don't use them regularly, you get this hardening little buildup thing on the end. You want to pick that off. See, and then you get a funky spray out of it. I mean, it's whatever. It's still usable. I just don't use them very often with the work that I'm doing, so. All right, now we just stick that onto that. Now, like I said, I want to bring these down, so let me just pencil that in, like right here. I think that'll be better. So we'll come down, I think this is a 1/4 inch grid, so we'll come down another 1/4 of an inch like that on those. All right, now let's get the bandsaw setup, because that's what we're going to use to cut out that template. This whole deal is going to be a lot of bandsaw and sander. I had originally decided to try and use the router with the template to give it a nice finished shape after I rough cut the tools. I was going to use the template. Aha. I don't know what this is from, but I think I found the other piece of it yesterday on the floor. I'm not sure what machine it fell off of. Fortunately, I set aside the other piece. I didn't lose it. Anyway, as I was saying, it was my initial intention to use the MDF template, rough cut the knife on the bandsaw, and then use the router to put a finished shape to it using the template and a finishing bit on the router. But that didn't work so well, and I'm not sure I actually need to do that. So on my next one, for my next trick, on my next one, I am just going to use the bandsaw and cut it carefully on the bandsaw and then use the sander and see how that works out. So let's put on our dust mask. Eyes and ears, children, eyes and ears. I actually like using these goggles when I have a lot of fine dust flying around because they do a better job than the impact safety lenses. The safety glasses stop chunks from hitting my eyes, but they don't do a good job keeping the dust out. Looks like we just had a blade break there. So you all get to join me while I replace the blade. Please make sure you unplug before servicing a machine this way. This blade wasn't all that old, but at the same time, it wasn't all that expensive either. And my guess is, yeah, looks like it broke right at the weld there. I don't know if it's focusing or not, but I'm pretty sure that's what happened. It broke at the weld. So we will have to carefully dispose of this so we don't cut ourselves on it. Fortunately, I have plenty of spare blades for this. So this will temporarily delay the project, but it certainly won't derail it. That's the word I'm looking for. Where did I put the other? Excuse me for a moment. I think my other spare blades are back this way. I usually have them hanging off the side of the machine, but in this case, they're back over here. Whoops, that's not. The question is, which blade do I put on? I've got this nice thin one with these little skinny teeth for making nice fine cuts. There we go, that's focusing, sort of. It's focusing-ish. How about if I do it like this? There we go, that's a focus. And I've got this blade, which has got more coarse teeth and is a lot wider, but this is more for like resawing. Not, you know, like big resawing or anything like that, but resawing nonetheless. And then, yeah. Oh, and then this is another fine tooth blade. Yeah, this is just another fine tooth blade like that first one was. Come on, focus. There we go. So it's weird because I thought I had another one that, like the one that just broke, but I don't. Oh, you know what? Yeah. So got these two. No, they look about the same. So let's go with the skinnier one with the more teeth. Hey, you get to see how to change the blade on a bandsaw. You want to make sure the teeth are going in the right direction. Oh, I got to take this off. Probably going to have to adjust the guides too. I'll pop out the little throat plate. Man, it is dusty in there. But, you know, this is a bandsaw. They are dusty things. Probably if I bought like a real good quality blade, it would be less likely to break. I mean, that seems like kind of a given. right? Good quality blade, less likely to break. All right, let's get this on the wheels and start taking up some of that tension. Putting blades on bandsaws is always at least a little bit fiddly. Just kind of the nature of the beast. If I, put a little pressure down there. Just have to slip my finger out of the way before it gets pinched, which is not a problem. Yeah, I'm going to adjust. You can't see that. Let's bring you over here. Maybe we can get you a view of what's going on down in there. Here we go. So I think this thrust bearing is a little too far forward this way. So get in there with an Allen wrench, loosen that up, move that back a little bit. All right, we're going to adjust those lower bearings too. I think they're a little too close together and they're definitely too far back. And let's see how the upper guides are doing. Definitely too far back. And there's the thrust bearing. These upper ones are a lot easier to adjust, obviously, than the lower ones are. Thrust bearing should just about touch the blade. You can see the weld right there. I don't know if you can see that. I can twist it. See, that's the weld right there. It's, you know, it is what it is. Until I buy a really expensive blade. Now see up here, when I spin this, you see this right bearing is turning, but the left one is sitting still, which means that the whole assembly is a little too much this way, and or that bearing is a little too much that way. That's better. See, nothing's really moving right there. That's what you want. You want them close, but not quite touching. All right, let's get down to the lower here. You need to adjust that whole lower guide block. If you're using exactly the same blade, you don't need to make all of these different adjustments. We want those bearings to sit square and just behind the teeth. Like that. Okay. And we want to bring this up so it's just barely behind the blade. Like that. And these two need to be pretty much right where they are, honestly. Although, if I'm being honest, that doesn't look quite square. Sorry, I have to move you out here. Yeah, the whole guide assembly looks like it's tweaked that way just a little bit. So let's adjust that. A little hard to see. It'd be nice if there was something on here that would assure that those are squared to the blade. There really isn't, unfortunately. Okay, that seems decent. Blade tensioning is also something you kind of do by feel. I wish there was a better way to do that, but there doesn't seem to be. All right, we got that all in place. Let's give her a quick powered spin up to make sure everything stays in place. Definitely need to work on my shop layout a bit. But here we are for now, anyway. Blade is a little further back on the wheels than I generally like. Let's see if we can adjust that forward a little bit. Yeah, there we go. That is dead center on the wheel where I want it. That one looks good too, which means I need to bring this thrust bearing forward just a little bit. Come on, Mr. Thrust Bearing. Come forward like you're supposed to. Seriously? There we go. There we go. Now I need a wrench. All right, That looks good enough. Let's get back to work here. Right, so there is our template. All ready to go. Now we need to transfer this to a piece of wood, which I have a bunch of planks ready to go here, but we're going to start with just the plain old soft maple, or so I was told it was soft maple. I don't know if it is or not. Kind of feels more like hard maple to me, but I think I want to try and catch some of this figure right here. So I'm going to put it, it's really wasteful. Look, is what I'm saying. This is an incredibly wasteful way to cut this piece out of this wood. But I really want to try and catch some of that figure in the handle itself. So, all right, now you can kind of see that. I'll make that a little darker. Make that really dark so I can't miss the line. That's a bit better. Now back to the bandsaw. I just need to cut as close to that line as I possibly can. Now you can see why I created a dust confinement zone with the plastic sheets hanging up. Between the sanders and the router and the lathe, they make an awful mess. And keeping it localized helps to keep it from spreading too much around the shop. I mean, it's not like the shop doesn't get dusty. There's plenty of loose sawdust floating around. I mean, this is also why I have 3 air cleaners running 24/7. So I can come down here and not choke to death on my own dust. Anyway, there it is. Next step is we need to mount the blade. Now, I messed up initially when I did this one by mounting it really centered in these, but that left the teeth shy of this edge of the wood. So as you'd cut down, you'd get to where the handle was hitting the cutting board and the blade wasn't cutting all the way through the bread. So we need to make sure we mount this just so. Ooh, and I do not have a whole lot of room to spare for those screws. So let me do this one first. Maybe I'll do the nose. Let's do the nose one first. So I'm going to mark that where I want it. And we'll center punch that. My change in design is making that a little harder too, because when I push down on here, it tends to roll it up, whereas this one sat nice and flat. So maybe I can extend this a little bit further out to make that a little bit easier. Anyway, yeah, I did not leave myself a whole lot of spare room there, so I may have to adjust that yet again in the design. And I got some nice brass screws to replace the cheap ass silver metal ones that it came with. So it'll look a little bit nicer. But it does mean I have to be extra careful screwing them in, especially going into hardwood like maple, because they will shear off. The heads will just shear off the screws very easily if I don't have a proper pilot hole. I could put a little bit of wax on the threads, actually. It probably would be a good idea. All right, so now let me bring this over here and mark that. Oops. I'll mark it so I can actually see it. Now, I actually want to drill a little bit too far that way to make sure the blade stays in tension, because if the screw holes are too close together, the blade will just be flexed up, and that is not any good. This is what I have learned making one of these already. Whoops. Just like that. See? I said it, I manifested it, and it happened. The top of that sheared right off. So, I am left with very few options here, because I can't move this blade position a whole lot Oh, and that one clutched out. Maybe I'll use bigger brass screws. I wonder if I can actually drill that out. Let me drill that out. Try drilling that out and going with a slightly oversized screw. Slightly larger screw. They're not really oversized. I mean, it is only brass, so it should drill out fairly easily, although brass is still harder than wood. But not by much. It's just skipping off. It is just skipping off. That's a problem. Let me go up a bit size. See, this is why you do this sort of thing, so you can learn. And figure out what works and what doesn't work and how you're going to fuck it up, so when you go to make proper ones, you don't fuck it up. M2.5, those are M3s, so. Not that these are metric drill bits or anything. I probably should have some metric drill bits, to be quite honest. All right, see if we can make that work. Let's go with the M3 screws. See if we can make this work. I mean, yeah, that is so far out. I don't. I mean, I do still have the option of taking this off, flipping the blade over, and making it a left-handed knife. So that doesn't really work for what I have. All right, these definitely need to be. I think I can make this happen anyway. By drilling in at an angle here. But my next design, these two definitely need to be a little closer together. Not much, just like a quarter of an inch. Not even necessarily a quarter of an inch on each side, just like a quarter of an inch total. All right. Oh. And that's actually a hair too close. Oh, kill me now. Seriously. No, don't go into that hole. You need to be lower than that hole. and further back. That's not going to do it. Wow. See, if these were a little closer together, I'd have a little bit of right and left shifting that I could play with. But as it stands, I do not have that. The drill just wants to walk. This is where I need a brad point bit. It's just walking up to that hole there, which is not what I want. Yeah. This is getting very problematic. But you know, this is why I make prototypes. To figure out what's going to go wrong. Catastrophically wrong, as a matter of fact. So I can address it before I make final ones. You know, this all would have been fine if I hadn't broken off that first screw head. Everything would have been just peachy. Well, all right. It's not perfect, but it is good enough. So let's do the finish now. And what I used on the first one was Odie's Tried and True. This is polymerized linseed oil and beeswax mixed together. It's not boiled linseed oil. Because boiled linseed oil, I mean, it's sort of the same thing, only with boiled linseed oil, they typically add metallic drying agents to speed up the dry time. And the polymerized linseed oil doesn't have that. So it's food safer. I'm not convinced that boiled linseed oil is inherently not food safe. I don't know how much of those metallic drying agents are actually in the oil and how much they'll actually leach out into food. But this is like better safe than sorry, you know? I think this is a nice finish for these. I think I'll probably do this with all of them. It still dries relatively quickly. Linseed oil is very sticky. for some reason. Okay. Now we will bring this upstairs and test it out on the loaf of bread that I bought today. So what am I thinking successes and failures here? Well, obviously the blade not being the right distance apart is a fail. It's an epic fail. But I like the location of this handle much better. This feels much more balanced. I like it kind of in between the blade and the weight of the wood. I gave it a little indent here, an indent here for the thumb and the index finger. So it gives it kind of a bit of a more natural grip, which I like. I did manage to catch that figuring in there. And I might just like glue a block onto each of these, bring them out just a little bit, and redo the screws through that secondary block, which I think I'm actually just going to do now, because that is not a straight blade. Meow. And that's not acceptable for me. So I think I might do that, and then we'll bring this upstairs and we'll give it a test. And I'll post that as a short.